Hey there, Internet. My name's Luxander. Today we are going to talk about the idea of Bi Lesbians and whether that's a real thing that you could identify as. Be aware, this might be a little bit of a rant video. The only reason I have notes for this video is because I have been ranting about this and was taking notes on my own ranting to keep track of all the different thoughts that I had about the idea of bi lesbians. So, let's get into it. So what is a bi lesbian? What does this mean? If a lesbian, we typically know, is like a woman who loves women, right? This is typically what we think of a lesbian. There's probably like a dictionary definition. I'm not gonna cite it because I'm gonna tell you this right off the bat. The dictionary definition of words in the queer community has no bearing on their use in the queer community. So we're just going to start there. But yes, a lesbian is a woman who loves other women, typically. To put a modifier on that, which is what it is to call yourself a bi lesbian. It's to say, I am a bisexual person and a lesbian. How can you be both of those things? Well, let me tell you. One way of looking at this is with the sort of split model of attraction, in that there are, you could say you're romantically attracted to certain types of people and you're sexually attracted to different kinds of people. Most of the time, for most people, these are the same. Like, straight people generally have a romantic and sexual orientation that are the same. And we have, like, the existence of asexual people, though, within the queer community. So many of them still want to have a romantic relationship, and they have an orientation as to who they want to be with romantically, right? Like, they might not be, like, sexually motivated to be with a woman, but they romantically want to be with women, okay? So when you say bisexual lesbian, what you're saying is you're a woman who loves women, but is capable of being sexually attracted to men or other genders. Like, the big conflict here is about whether you can be attracted to men as a lesbian, like as a bi lesbian, right? Which is interesting that the definition is woman who loves women, but these people who argue against the existence of bi lesbians seem to be okay with lesbians being attracted to non-binary people. But we'll get to that in a minute. I don't really know where to put this point that I'm about to make. I'm just going to put it out here right here. The idea that bisexual women cannot be part of the lesbian community is ahistorical, because like most lesbian activism up to, like, I don't know, probably like the 80s or 90s at least, explicitly included bisexual women. Like, I'm sorry, it just did. Bisexual women are women who love women. They are. That is what a bisexual woman is. It's a woman who loves women and other genders. So kind of jumping back to what I was saying about the split model of attraction, I think it would probably be most accurate to say that someone who calls themselves a bi lesbian is using shorthand. So what they would say, so bi itself is shorthand, okay? So the shorthand for bisexual, we're starting there. A bisexual, homoromantic woman. I would offer that someone who says I'm a bi lesbian is using these terms to indicate that the shorthand for bisexual homoromantic woman. I'd like to take a minute to discuss some reasons that someone might choose to identify as a bi lesbian. I know some people, like personally I know some people who primarily identify as lesbians, but are aware that there are instances in which they could be attracted to men. Sometimes it's like, oh, I could be with like a really feminine man. Or for some people, they just like recognize that there are exceptions. Like, just every once in a while, they will be like, wow, that man is attractive. And it's important enough to them to call themselves bi, apparently. But these are women who don't want to pursue romantic relationships with men. They're aware that it's possible for them to be attracted, at least physically, but they're not interested in pursuing men. They're identifying as lesbians to tell everyone around them that they are only interested in relationships with women, broadly speaking. In the queer community, we basically use all of these terms to signal things to each other. You should watch Philosophy Tube's video called Queer Sparkle, because he talks about language games within the queer community. Like, we don't use terms explicitly based on their dictionary definition always. A good portion of the time, we borrow words, we take on words temporarily. You know, we use shorthand to try to describe our experiences to people. If you have been following my channel for any amount of time, you would probably know at this point that I prioritize effective communication. My video about bisexual versus pansexual, I used to prefer identifying as pansexual, because if you say bi to someone who's outside of the queer community, they're going to hear, oh, I'm attracted to men and women, even though I am also attracted to people who are not men and women. It's about communication and being effective at not only like, am I comfortable with the label, but when people hear what I'm saying, they understand what I mean without me having to necessarily explain. Calling myself pansexual does sometimes require explanation. I no longer identify as pansexual. I'm just queer now. But understanding that we don't necessarily use labels in a one-to-one, and not everyone who identifies as a particular thing is necessarily going to have the same experience as someone else. There are loads of people who identify as trans women, but who are non-binary and just don't want to talk about it publicly because it's harder for them. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're using trans women to communicate a lot of things, but not everything. It gives you the broadest idea and allows them to keep their non-binary identity safe, right? Okay, now we're going to move into some fun stuff. So far, every time I have gotten into an argument about the concept of bi lesbians, it has been with someone who identifies as a non-binary lesbian. Okay? So, for these people, it is apparently okay to be flexible on the definition of woman in the first part of the definition of lesbian, but it is unacceptable to be flexible on women in the latter part of the definition of lesbian. You don't have to be a woman who loves women, but you can only love women. Except that's not what they usually believe. They don't usually believe that you can only love women. They usually include non-binary people. This is rich. It's rich, okay? I got into this argument with someone, or, discussion, argument, whatever, and they claimed that it's not woman who loves women, okay? It's a woman-aligned person who loves women-aligned people. Which is really funny because in my this was in response to a tweet that I put out, which basically was like, are lesbians able to be attracted to NBs? And I followed it up by saying, I challenge you to make this argument without insinuating that non-binary people are just woman light. And this person failed miserably. That is definitionally what it is to treat non-binary people like they're basically just women. Okay? Like, not only are you being inconsistent about your definitions, but you're misgendering people along the way. Interesting. If you can't tell, I'm very annoyed at the inconsistency of the beliefs of these people. And also, if it wasn't clear enough by now, I think you should leave people alone and let them identify however they want to and stop fucking gatekeeping. All right, we're kind of winding up. We're winding down a little bit, but so I have come to be aware of the idea of comphet. It was a lot of my thoughts on it started with Natalie's video called Shame, where, compulsory heterosexuality is what comphet is short for, which basically is this idea that women, generally, like women, who they grow up and they are taught that relationships with men are supposed to be kind of difficult and like emotionally unfulfilling. So a lot of women will just kind of go along with that, not realizing that they are not even attracted to men at all. Like, it's not just that they're a straight woman who's not in a relationship that is fulfilling, but that they are actually gay women who are trying to make themselves function as heterosexual. So this is what compulsory heterosexuality is, very broadly speaking. And I have had people tell me that identifying as a bi lesbian is somehow playing into comphet. Now, listen to me. As I stated earlier, typically, a bi lesbian is someone who recognizes that they can be physically, sexually attracted to non-women, okay? But they're only interested in pursuing relationships with women. So by telling them that they're not allowed to identify as lesbians means that you're telling them they are only allowed to identify as bi, which means you're telling them they have to be available to men. Because the point of identifying as a lesbian, in some cases, is to tell men that you are not interested in them. I know someone in my personal life who, a number of years ago, was in a relationship with a cis man. This was, like, someone I know who is assigned female at birth and, like, mostly identifies as a woman, but at the time was in a relationship with a cis man and still primarily identified as a lesbian because they're poly and were not interested in any other men. They had the one man, but they did not want to indicate to men that they were allowed to come take swipes. Now, we all know that sometimes when a woman says, like, I'm a lesbian, that men take that as a challenge, but the purpose of identifying as a lesbian in those cases is to explicitly say, I am not open to men. I am not interested in dating men. So by telling women who could potentially, you know, and here's another thing. You could potentially be talking about women who have been victimized by men. So they are bisexual because they have been in sexual and romantic even relationships with men in the past, but they are traumatized and don't want to date men anymore. Like, you are telling these women that they have no choice but to use language that indicates that they are available to men. If you want to come at me about comphet, you need to really sit down and think about that one. Once again, if you couldn't tell, it's mostly the hypocrisy that makes me so mad. And the last point that I will say about this is that basically every term in the queer community is or can be an umbrella term. Bi can be an umbrella term that also includes pansexual and omnisexual and polysexual. You can just broadly say, like, I'm bi, and have the details of that be, like, private, you know? Gay. Most queer people call ourselves gay, at least sometimes, usually for fun, but, like, I'm not homosexual. I don't know what that means for a non-binary person anyway, but, like, I am not homosexual. And yet, I am gay. Because that's how shit works in the queer community. Like, queer is an umbrella term, non-binary is an umbrella term, trans is an umbrella term, just not lesbian. Although, again, as I said earlier, lesbian means a woman who loves women, which means that every bisexual woman is a lesbian. Fuck you! I'm out of here. That was it. That's it. That's the mic drop. I'm done. I can do no more for the queer community. This is it for me. Seriously though, that's all the notes that I've taken on my ranting about this over the past couple of weeks. Hey, Editing Lux here. I actually do want to make one last point, which is that someone said to me that TERFs will sometimes call lesbians bi lesbians if they have been in relationships with trans women, and I just have to say, since when did we start letting TERFs decide how we use words within the queer community? Seriously. Stop policing other people. Just let people identify with whatever they're comfortable with. Stop having discourse about bi lesbians while we are still in the midst of, like, nationwide and even, like, national, at this point, like, international protests for police brutality. People are getting fucking kidnapped off of the streets in Portland. And we are here talking about discourse. I can't believe that I have been sucked into this. Again, just honestly, why do you care so much about what other people do? And no, actually, here's my actual last point. People keep telling me that it's somehow harmful. Maybe this is the comp het argument. But people keep telling me it's harmful to lesbians to identify as a bi lesbian. And I'm just gonna tell you now that okay, so here's the thing. If you go into my comments and of this video and you say that it's harmful without demonstrating that harm, I will block you from the channel. Like, it's really bullshit to just say something is harmful to people. Like, oh, this is hurting our community, without demonstrating that harm. You're just wielding the concept of potential hurt in order to police other people. Stop it. Stop doing that. It's a waste of your fucking time. Grow up. Care about things that actually matter. Okay? Okay. Fucking talking about, like, trans people losing healthcare rights, and you're out here talking about harm. Fuck off. That's gonna be all from me today, though. If you like this video, please give me pretty analytics to look at and comments to read. Patreon, PayPal, subscribe, ring the bell, because I am not on any kind of regular schedule right now, if you want to. And I hope you have an okay day. Bye. Blessings and love to all of my patrons, especially Tina M., R. Halverson, Michelle Winter, Sarah A., Suzanne Maynard, Wellington Marcus, Amanda B., Athiette, Elizabeth Bartell, Eileen McCall, Frozen Summers, Rose Above It Showing Up, and Mr. Atheist.